Our next presentation is going to be a case study, and it is on fast-track cybersecurity implementation. The presentation is going to be shared with us by Miki Shifman, the CTO and co-founder of Cylus. And Miki will be presenting here for the next 30 minutes, and he will be available for 10 minutes in Q&A after this. So without further ado, Miki, we'd like to invite you to the stage.
Hi everyone, just sharing it right now. Hope it's good.
You're good.
Great, so thank you, James. Thank you also the rest of the speakers and also all of the attendees. I see that we have some great engagement over here, and it's great to see how many great people are working on real cybersecurity. So good night, everyone, or good evening. I'm based out of Israel, so it's 9:20 p.m. over here. And today, I'm going to speak on behalf of Cylus, and we're going to talk about the case study that our company did over the recent years, and it's about the fast track to a cybersecurity implementation. Oh, sorry. Okay, cool. So first, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Miki Shifman. I'm co-founder and CTO at Cylus. Cylus, we're a company focused on real cybersecurity. So I have over 10 years experience in cyber R&D. So before I used to wear button-up shirts, I used to hack things. A lot of my background is coming from military intelligence background. I used to serve as an officer in one of the top units of Israeli cyber intelligence. And one additional important activity I'm taking care of is working with the World Economic Forum in cybersecurity mobility, and I'm one of the cybersecurity mobility experts at this forum. And it's nice to meet you. I'll start with a quick background about Cylus and who we are. So Cylus, we are looking ourselves as the global leaders and pioneers of real cybersecurity. So what we do is we provide real companies cybersecurity solutions to protect their systems from cyber threats and operational risks. And we do it all while ensuring safety and service availability. Quick facts, so we have the broadest real cybersecurity solutions portfolio. We are deployed at leading rail companies, and we are rail-focused technology pioneers, meaning we are doing our best efforts to promote railways cybersecurity in the global scale. So we work in different territories, we work all around the world, and we have offices in many regions. And apart from that, we are also taking part at standard activities, security research for rail cybersecurity. We are helping vendors to improve their postures and also improving the future standards of rail, and of course, making sure that cybersecurity is well considered in the future standards. The security we provide is not just any type of security. We are not the typical IT security company or OT security company. We are a company that is focused on railways, and that is our entire focus of engineering, of research, of development. And we do it in a way that we provide solutions to various parts of railways. We provide solutions to the rolling stock, and we provide solutions to the signaling part of the network. And by that, we help railway companies to address the entire cyber risk. So before we start the case study, I want to start with a quick background and to let off some of the steam before we start. So let's understand the year that we operate in. We're in 2020. 2020 is a record-breaking year, a negative aspect for cyber perspective. It's a year in which attacks have been increased all across industries. Many enterprises have been attacked. government facilities, transportation authorities, and so on. The number of attacks have been almost doubled over 2 years, which is quite worrying. And it means that basically every company becomes a target, specifically rail companies, which are very important to their nations and, of course, the civilians. And we see that within rail, companies of all sizes have been hacked, meaning that companies that are manufacturing equipment, infrastructure managers, local transit authorities, any company in the supply chain. So basically, everyone got attacked. And at the same time, we understand that it's about time that companies will start taking the cybersecurity aspects and taking into consideration cybersecurity within their plans. And specifically here, we had a customer which is a good metro operator in Asia Pacific, very forward-thinking, and approached us because he was about to implement CBTC technology and build another CBTC line. What we look at the customer is usually cybersecurity maturity. So the specific customer had a CISO, which is a great start, and they also had a cybersecurity team, which means that they're taking OT security team, and which means that they're taking OT security seriously. And as many railway companies, they are also operator of essential services, meaning they need to implement regulations coming from the cybersecurity regulator of the government. The goal of implementing CBTC technology is basically to connect parts of the cities to reduce headway, making sure that you can put more trains in a given time, and also adding capacity. In this case, it was to add capacity for 10 million riders a year. And quickly about CBTC, so just a quick background for those of you who are not familiar with it. So CBTC stands for Communication-Based Train Control. It's a technology mostly operated in transit authorities, metro operators. And its goal is basically to reduce the headway between trains and make sure that the traffic, of course, is safe. It also implements automatic train operation, meaning basically trains can be operated based on remote commands, not just stopped based on remote commands. For us as cybersecurity people, automatically it all goes down to the communication part and the fact that currently the train is entirely controlled by communications, by computers, and it means it can be exposed to different threats related to that. So usually nowadays, companies that implement CBTC technologies, they have some sort of wireless communication frequently, and also in this case, it's based on Wi-Fi, meaning that you can no longer say that the network is air-gapped. You must acknowledge the fact that communications are passing through the air, and someone external can make some sort of effect. But apart from that, there are, of course, many digital technologies that are in charge of interlocking and other aspects of signaling, which can also, of course, be at risk. So starting by implementing CBTC is a great start, but 2020, as I mentioned, was a record-breaking year for cyber attacks, and specifically the country in which this line has been implemented has been under repeated attacks by nation-state threat actors. That's something that we also witnessed in other parts of the world, that there is some sort of, let's say, behind-the-scenes cyber war between different countries, and that cyber war can get to any part of the infrastructure. So in this case, the country has been targeted, including in critical infrastructure, and some damage has been made to other utilities. And it's a practice that we frequently see. We saw it in other countries as well, in which the country starts by saying, okay, so let's identify the operators of essential services. What are the most important assets that we have within the country? And make sure that these operators of essential services have some sort of a framework that they're following. In this case, the regulator decided to focus on the standard called IC 62443-3-3 and make sure that the company reaches some target security level as part of it, which is security level 3 at some of the systems. And it focused also on implementing some other internal methodologies based on based on the local practice. That's something that we also frequently see, that there are some go-to standards, let's say that way, of NIST or IEC, but at the same time, some of the regulators also have their own threat intelligence, their own practices. So requirements in tenders and in projects become quite ad hoc. But that's something quite common in the rail industry. So having standards is a good start. So safety is based on heavy set of standards. So cybersecurity is probably going to be next in that case. So when the CISO of the company got the task of complying with those cybersecurity standards, there automatically starts the dilemma within railway companies. So on one hand, I mentioned that the regulators identify the operators of essential services, and each operator of essential services needs to comply with some sort of regulations. Usually the next step for the operator of essential services is to look into its crown jewels, which in railway operators are usually let's call it the Cylus systems, the signaling systems, the ones that are in charge of passing of the transit itself. And then the CISO, as part of the project, he wants to apply the security requirements coming from the regulator. And as I mentioned, the security landscape changes. So when the project started originally, the security know-how was quite low, but at the same time, attacks have increased over the country, and the requirement became quite important for cybersecurity. So the CISO wants to apply the security requirements. At the same time, we have a CBTC line, a metro line that the government officials are waiting for, that the mayor is waiting for, and the signaling team is kind of in charge of making sure that the project is on time. And railway projects are super complex. They have tons of moving parts. Those parts can include the signaling system, the construction, even the hiring of people to operate the line. And usually the last thing that operation people want to hear is that we need to do more investment, because usually more investment and more requirements for the suppliers is coming with a delay. And scope changes, especially ones that are coming quite late in the project life cycle, are quite scary for them. And so we mentioned that the regulator wants to implement some standards, but there is some gap between standards and reality. And the gap is related to two things. One is related to time, and the second is related to budget, and they're probably tied up to each other because usually time implies budget as well. So in this case, we had a safety system, CBTC system. Many parts of it are based on SIL 4. SIL 4 stands for Safety Integrity Level 4. And it means that the system has already gone through a serious set of homologation processes. And the main fear of operations team is that adding security components will require to go through safety analysis very soon. For safety analysis again. And going through safety analysis again doesn't just mean that you need to buy the security components. It also means you need to test them in this environment. And it's super costly and can be beyond the project scope. And that's something which is very scary when you are about to implement a new line. So what we see here is a classical V-shaped model of a development process of a RAMS-based system. And the problem is that usually you can't touch this. Once you start touching it in different parts, you need to go through all over the process. The process is not that agile. It's really waterfall, V-shaped. So it means that if you make significant changes in architecture, introduce new components, you usually need to restart parts of the process, change tons of documentation, get lots of approvals, make sure that you meet different tests. And that's usually the scary part of introducing another technology to your signaling system. So let's look at some of the operators' challenges in meeting the regulations, and see how they can be addressed or cannot be addressed. So One first challenge is the basic one. Railway system is a big system. It's widespread, can be over many stations. That's a metro line. It can be tens of kilometers. And it's very hard for an operator out of the box to understand what are the assets that are connected, especially when the network is that big, especially when no one is reporting that and it's distributed. We already saw in previous presentation how difficult is asset management. And the straightforward approach was to go to NUC implementation. That's the classic IT play for understanding what are the allowed connected assets. But reality says that it's very hard to implement NUC in a distributed environment or in an environment that you have different types of protocols, different types of devices and connectivities, not that centralized. So NUC couldn't have been implemented, and it was quite of a pain to implement it. And also, some NUC implementations require a significant level of encryption that also doesn't exist in those environments. Second challenge is something which is very typical to CBTC systems that are related to, it's more similar to a telecom system, and it's the fact that communication is heavily based on multicast and broadcast messaging, because in many of the cases, in those proprietary technologies, the proprietary CBTC technologies, it's very hard to know where the train is located. So many of the commands are being sent over, let's call it multicast over IP or broadcast over IP. And that's a serious pain of segmentation. So many times operators just add firewalls to the system, and it looks nice because you have firewalls as part of your solution. But the problem is that firewalls are not that effective. We end up with a very permissive policy because no one understands what the traffic that goes through the system. And as most of the logic is in the application level, the firewalls basically doesn't do much except for standing there. Firewalls can filter over specific IPs and ports. They're effective over that part. They can do also DPI, but they can do DPI only on very narrow set of IT protocols. And when the logic is in the application level, the firewalls are not so helpful. And even more than that, many of the OT or the CBTC proprietary protocols are just using a huge variety of ports. So you can't even know what are the communications, and it's very hard to fingerprint them in advance. So this is another challenge that the operator faced. The third challenge is 80% of the traffic is based on proprietary protocols. So that's not an easy start for an operator, because if the protocols are proprietary, it means that most of the traffic that goes through the network, even if it meets some security appliance like a firewall or an IDS, it doesn't generate much value because the communication is not based on that. So what I recommend is like the Wireshark test. If, for example, in your network, you have you open a recording in Wireshark and then you open it, and you see that Wireshark identifies mostly TCP, UDP, or ARP, or like low-level protocols in the system, and you want to buy a commodity a solution, you need to rethink, because this commodity solution probably won't generate much value because it's not built for those scenarios. Maybe it was built for a typical enterprise network, maybe for specific industries, which are not rail. But the commodity solutions are usually not very effective in an environment which is very proprietary. And although many of the standards say buy IDS, buy firewall, they can say that those solutions, except for ticking boxes in some standards that auditors can sometimes allow to do that, they're not generating any significant value in the system. You don't want to get a bunch of assets that you're not familiar with. You don't want to get a solution that analyzes traffic that is not capable of analyzing. So it doesn't make any sense. The fourth challenge is something which is also that we typically see in proprietary traffic, and that's the fact that proprietary traffic is not encrypted, and it happens specifically on railway systems. I remember first dealing with railway systems, I wasn't sure why proprietary traffic is not encrypted. There are different arguments related to latency and so on. And then maybe let's first start, why is it even a problem? So the problem, if the traffic is not encrypted, then it also says that it's not authenticated in some of the cases, in this case particularly. It means that you can easily conduct spoofing or replay attacks, meaning if you're inside the network, you can just record traffic, and then you can replay it and see what happens, for example. And it would be accepted. Maybe it wouldn't work, so you can tweak it. But as an attacker, that's something that you can do. But if we go back to why it's not even encrypted, then I digged into some of the standards. So I looked into EN 5159, and there is a very interesting definition over there of transmission systems. Many of the railway systems say we're secure based on EN 5159. So I wanted to understand, what does it mean? And there is some interesting definition about systems called Category 1 and Category 2. So let's start maybe first by Category 3. Category 3 are systems that are based on wireless communications. You have some of those. We mentioned CBTC systems are based on Wi-Fi, ERTMS based on GSMR or GPRS. But there are the rest. The rest is the entire wired system of the railways. And you can include MVB networks, which are the onboard, or Profibus, or Ethernet, or LANs within the wayside. What's interesting over here, and that's the core railway standard for transmission systems, is that there is this definition of what types of networks exist. And then you see that it's designed for known and fixed maximum number of participants, and there's a negligible opportunity for unauthorized access. I wasn't sure what it means. And then I looked into another table, and that's an interesting one because it's a table of requirements. And it basically says that masquerading is not really a threat in Category 1 and Category 2 systems. So meaning if someone implements a safety system, and this safety system is wired, for instance, just a network, and it doesn't include any encryption or authentication, it's because it's not afraid of masquerading. So what we see in this case is quite an awkward mix of protocols that are obsolete, hash protocols or something like that. But the case is that it's not even a requirement, so that's why it never happens. And that's why we end up with many systems that are not authenticated, and hackers can do whatever they want over there. So what we did in the case of the operator is introduced our solution, Cylus 1. So we look at Cylus 1 as one small addition for a rail system and one giant leap for rail cybersecurity. What's interesting about our solution is a very plug-and-play installation of the solution. We just use a mirror port. So we connect our solution to a mirror port, we get a copy of the traffic, and then we start doing the magic. Our solution addresses the entire cyber risk, so it means that we are trying to address different types of cyber risks, and many of them we are capable of reducing almost to zero. And we generate the value within minutes. So when the operator installs our solution first as part of a proof of concept, it could see what we do very quickly. And what did we do? So some examples was dealing with asset discovery and inventory. We provided the operator with up-to-date inventory and baseline that learns the normalized asset patterns. And we alerted on suspicious behavior of unauthorized asset and access. That's an interesting case. We talked earlier about how segmentation works and how firewalls work in environments. So actually, this year we launched a feature called virtual segmentation, and it looks at the standard like IC 62443 and does the work for the operator in dividing into zones and conduits. We can also incorporate information from that. But in this case, what was good is that we looked at these multicast protocols, broadcast protocols, the ones that are based on proprietary traffic, and we actually helped the operator to segment the systems into zones and conduits automatically. And we could track whether something happens and whether someone breaches the policy of the zone and conduits. The policies were quite easy to edit, and the operator could get automatic suggestion and then adapt it according to his needs. And what's interesting in the zones and conduits is we take into account all the protocols that are used within the network. We're not just looking at the HTTP protocol or just TCP or lower level. We actually look at the entire stack of protocols and the entire layers of the OSI stack and make sure that Cylus 1 is capable of addressing the threats in those layers and make sure that even if safety concerns were in the picture, still Cylus One can provide good security for the operator. Last but not least is the threat detection. So threat detection that we do at Cylus One is something that we're really proud of. It's based on a great team of researchers that we have within the company. This team of researchers continuously researches the latest threats of railways. We also do vulnerability disclosures. And the Cylus One threat detection engine is actually a combination of proprietary threat detection and threat detection that is based on CVEs. And that way we are able to address the entire threats and make sure that any threats that has been discovered. Yes, James?
Just a couple more minutes, just one minute.
Sure, no problem. I'm already ending the presentation. So we make sure to address the entire spectrum of threats and make sure that we can do both threats that are involving sending wrong movement authorities to a train or spoofing movement authority, as well as threats that include typical attacks that are trying to do reconnaissance attempts on the network or exploit some vulnerabilities in existing assets. And it's important because many of the vulnerabilities in the assets, they can't be actually patched because it's a safety-based environment. Part of this V-shape can actually explain why does it happen. And in this case, we actually help the operators to, even in unpatched environment, we help them to understand whether they have been breached and whether someone attempts to exploit the specific vulnerability. So my summary for this presentation and what we learned with this use case is that cybersecurity and safety, they can coexist. And that's something that we showed the operator, which came to us with different concerns about how we will impact the safety analysis of the system. And this operator got satisfied because he understood that the changes that he needs to make were negligible. He just needed to add some span ports, and the rest happened by the platform, and the platform helped to mitigate the risks. What's interesting, in addition, is that the implementation of a comprehensive cybersecurity solution like Cylus One can be done with minimal effort. By minimal effort, I mean minimal time, minimal amount of people that are doing the implementation on the operator side, and the operators can easily start working with it and get back into control and get back into understanding what's happening in their security environment. And finally, it's also the return on investment in the process. So we usually look at security as a cost center, or at least many companies look at security as a cost center. But here we saved between 5 to 7 other controls that the operator couldn't install but was required to by just implementing Cylus One, meaning that we actually spared money. And if we don't just look at the price of the control, but also the price of approving the control in a safety environment, which is even much more costly. So sometimes it can be 4 times the price of the software, it can be just the approval of the software, then it's even more impactful because Cylus One actually spared quite a significant budget. So thank you very much for your time. I invite you to visit our booth and get the Cylus One demo. We have a great team here in the event led by Ben, our VP of Marketing. And please feel free to reach out to me. You can do it on LinkedIn. I have this LinkedIn profile, and you can also send me an email. I'll be happy to address any topic and have a chat about cybersecurity in rail. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Great presentation from Cylus, from Miki Shifman. Thank you.